All right, we're live. I can also hear myself.
We can hear you as well, Alia. So yeah, you can hear yourself.
No, I'm not sure where the echo was coming from. Okay, well, we'll give everyone a few minutes to arrive. See, we're already at 43 attendees. We had over 250 registrations, so surely give them a few moments to arrive. And I know, hello, Gail. We've had people registering from all over the world. So it might be morning, afternoon, evening. So some people from Australia. How late is it in Australia right now, John? Well, you're not there.
Maybe he knows.
Evening in Australia. It's nighttime.
Okay. So it's like past happy hour time, right? It's like
it's midnight in Sydney.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
But I'm actually in London right now. So
some people are watching Netflix at midnight. Some people are watching webinars at midnight, right?
Correct.
Why not?
All right, we've got people from India, Bolivia, Amazonas, Portugal. Keep dropping in countries. That's great. Canada, good morning.
Yeah, in Canada, it's still a couple of hours to midnight.
Good afternoon, I guess. US, hello, good morning. India, good evening. I know it's quite late there too.
And coming from Paraguay.
Ciao, Italy. Plus one from Portugal. Guatemala.
It's a really nice mix.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that this just proves that carbon credits, sustainability is an important topic all over the world.
Kenya. Yeah, carbon credits are mobile and global, I think. Turkey. Good evening. Hello, Brazil. Salve. What's Salve?
It's like hello.
Is that a city name?
I think.
Is it a hello? Okay.
It's hello in Italian.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Stockholm. Okay, 2 more minutes and we'll kick it off.
Sounds like a plan.
Keep the last minute occupied. Where is everybody calling in from? Well, I'm calling in from France.
Kraków, Poland.
London.
Milan.
Berlin.
Right, it's 4:05. I think we've given everybody a fair chance to arrive, and it's time to kick it off. Welcome everyone to our panel on increasing effectiveness of the carbon credit markets. I'm here today with 4 panelists, and I think we're all brought here today by the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, right? Because that's what originally created the voluntary carbon markets. And that market is actually worth short or maybe even a little bit more of 2 billion as of today, and is actually projected to grow to as much as 1 trillion in about 15 years. But at the same time, it faces fundamental questions about its credibility and effectiveness. And as in every market, there are multiple parties involved, of course. We have project developers who together with landowners and conservation partners generate the supply. Then we've got the buyers who represent the demand. And we've got various technology providers who facilitate the MRV process, so the measurement, reporting, and verification. And luckily, we have representatives of all of those parties today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Dr. Dale Rickert here, who is joining us from the Green Future Festival.
Great. Thanks so much, Olya, and a pleasure to be here. I'm the head of product for the GreenTech Festival, and I guess some personal background to me. My job really involves, I plan the programs. We have festivals all over the world. So we have festivals in Los Angeles, New York, Singapore, London, and Berlin. And I have to choose the program and also speak with the potential speakers, often coming from startups or business or government scientists. And I'm thoroughly convinced that we're on the edge of a really fundamental shift in the way not only that we do business, but also how we live our lives. And I think that the carbon credit market is essential to that. And there's going to need to be a lot of evolutions that take place to really get us to that point. But just a little bit more about the festival more generally. Our next festival is in Berlin. We have 3 major components. So we have really the consumer side, which is the green exhibition, where we have technology companies from all over the world presenting their solutions and technology for the general public. We have the award ceremony, which is really interesting, I guess, a social movement. It's there for the media. It's there also to get a really broad public reach. So we've got celebrities come get involved, and we've had some very well-known names over the years receive prizes from us. People like Dr. Jane Goodall, Robert Redford, and even back in the day, 2 years after he started his little car company, Elon Musk also got a prize from us. So it's been around since 2008. It's a really great festival. It's big, so it takes place on the Tegel Airport in Berlin, 13,000 people, and yeah, do check out what we're up to. I'll put a little link in the handout section so you can have a look at our festival in more detail. But really look forward to talking to you all today and the discussions we're going to have around the carbon credit market.
Thank you, Dale. Very impressive. Jakub, you think you can top that off?
I'll try. Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jakub Dziwisz, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Orbify. Orbify is a geospatial data platform for monitoring natural resources, which means that we are taking satellite imagery geospatial data, and by using artificial intelligence, machine learning models, we are transforming this satellite data into insights about the environment around us, about, for example, carbon stocked on the ground, or condition of forests, or other information about water, air, etc. And well, we founded Orbify because we are seeing that there is a tremendous potential lying in data collected from space, the potential that is not being fully realized right now. And we decided that it's high time to democratize access to geospatial insights so that they can serve people like Dale, like Pietro, like John.
Thank you, Jakub. Speaking of John, you're up next.
Thank you. John Rogers. I'm the founder of InvestConservation. Founded InvestConservation a year ago, really with a mission to make conservation investable. The aim is to try to address the conservation of high conservation value tropical forests. And that really is the major challenge from both the climate change and a species extinction perspective. If we can do that, if we can protect these most valuable areas on Earth, we can really make the carbon and the biodiversity markets do something very, very powerful. So what we're doing is we're tokenizing nature reserves. so people can invest directly into high quality projects where they know the project is of high quality. And that's really what we're here to do. And that's what our mission and aim is. So look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, John. Now, last but not least, Pietro, please.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Pietro Pasolini. I'm the founder and CEO of Green Future Project. We have developed a software, a tech-empowered solution that helps businesses in the decarbonization journey. So we have a first software that helps to analyze the carbon footprint of a company, scope 1, 2, and 3, with the 1 and 2 automatized completely. And then we have a second software that allows companies to invest in the best climate solutions around the world. And we use, obviously, satellite technology together with remote sensing tool to track and track the impact, the positive impact that companies are doing while investing in these nature-based solutions. We believe that to really scale change drastically and rapidly as we need to rely on technology. Technology reduces costs. So software reduces costs, centralize information, and also help us to gather this data so that we can forecast. So we really truly believe that softwares and technology that simplifies actions is the key here.
Thank you, Pietro. All right, let's jump right into it. So, like we said, the VCM, or voluntary carbon market, was created by the Paris Agreement and adopted by the UN. However, UN did not really take it upon themselves to create the standards for the market. And then the private orgs stepped in and decided that somebody had to do it. And we're now facing the situation where the market is seeing a lot of scrutiny. My question to you guys would be, do we need some governmental oversight that needs to start happening in the market? Or can we, or you as private organizations, actually take some steps in improving the situation to make sure the markets actually become effective and transparent? John and Pietro, I would love for you to answer that.
Thank you. Why don't I take the lead? I would emphatically answer yes, we as the private sector can provide quality. I think if you look at what the issue has been in the market, it's been a problem of quality. People are investing in projects, and then when they finally go to the sites, they find actually the local community is saying, well, we're doing everything we're doing before. It's the same logging, it's the same problems as before. The carbon project has actually done very little. So it's a problem of quality, it's a problem of data, and it's a problem of reporting. And a lot of that is because we've been jammed into one box. To date, the existing project's been one person provides a signature rather than using a multitude of data sources. And one of the reasons we're so enthused with the Orbify platform and the Orbify analysis is you can use satellite data to show what's actually happening on the ground and get a degree of granularity, a degree of reporting clarity, which makes a huge difference. So customers, carbon purchasers can now say, this is the project I've got. And you can see exactly what you've got. You're not buying some black box where someone signed a document and that's really all you've got. So I'd argue the solution is to have more transparency, more clarity, and more data integrity. And I think that's what we're trying to work together to achieve. Pietro, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, you kind of stole my answer, but no, I completely agree with you. I think what's also needed is annual reporting. Many of the Vera projects have reporting every 5, 6, 7 years. We need via satellite technology to be able to have annual reports so that everybody invests within a project, they can really check and get an update on how the project is developing. And then obviously any government or intergovernmental regulation can hinder if they support that, but the technology, the skills, the capacity are there. Private market is always ahead in innovation, so we need to use these innovations, start to implement them within the various registry systems.
Dale, as somebody that's coming in from the buyer perspective, how do you get any sort of reporting on the credits that you're buying? How do you guys check up on that?
Yeah, so we get a report yearly from My Climate. Our carbon partner is My Climate, which is a not-for-profit based in Switzerland. And they give us an update on the projects that we've bought into. Now, interestingly enough, they've taken a different approach coming out of the Vera scandal and, well, let's just say the ring of scandals that have rocked the carbon market in the last 5 years, if we're honest. And they're they allocate a project to us which is meant to offset our activities, but they don't put it down to the gram. So it's not something where they're saying you can now hold this piece of paper up and say every single gram that you will produce is now offset by the project. So they are social projects or environmental projects. We're actually involved in a crossover project. So that's in Madagascar, where they're offering people in rural communities solar cooking stoves to reduce the cutting down of virgin rainforests and trees and natural vegetation. And this is something where, I mean, we like it for a number of reasons, because actually it touches different aspects of sustainability, not just that classic, are we offsetting against pure carbon kilos? I want to jump on something. Maybe I misunderstood, but I feel like in the carbon market, although technology has a huge and very essential role to play, because technology in the end is really going to give you transparency in a way you haven't had before, I believe very strongly we need third-party oversight. And if I'd probably hold up the flag here on the issues that we've seen over the years in terms of precedent. Anytime when there's any financial incentive to do the wrong thing, someone will. That's just history, and that's just human nature. And so I think we need a global, unified, not financial, sorry, but regulatory framework to actually hold this system together in the long term. Technology needs to play hand in hand with that, and they need to be, the regulators need to be part of those technological systems, things like satellite reporting, but also boots on the ground, so that people can actually see what's happening physically in those places. Because there's a lot of ways you can cheat the system, and you can put in lots of things to try and optimize your processes, things like blockchain. But if someone's cheating the system at the actual, the start, the saying is shit in, shit out kind of thing, then we're not going to have a system that's working. So therefore, I think regulation is essential for the future of the carbon market.
Thank you, Dale. That's a very interesting perspective. And the question that I had as a follow-up is, okay, we've got technology on the one hand, but on the other hand, shouldn't we be also looking into the original methodology, which is probably right now getting a little bit outdated, and it's just the sophistication, or rather the lack of it, is what might be causing the issue. I'm going to let Jakub answer that question, especially from the technology
Sure,
side.
thanks, Olia. And well, just like Dale said, right, the better data we have at the beginning of the system, the more precise we can be with our estimates assessment. And I'm completely with you, Dale, on the fact that we need better data, we need more fine-grained data. And this could be something that we acquire on the ground as well. I think that the most interesting actually is fusing data from multiple different sources. And here, satellite data is a great baseline. But for example, if you are saying, oh, there is something suspicious, it would be amazing to have a drone, for example, that goes in there and verifies. And then, yes, from the drone, we are still seeing that there is something suspicious. We can send people boots on the ground and triple check what it is, whether this is illegal logging, whether this is a pest that is attacking the trees, whether this is this or that. And for that reason, I'm fully with you on the fact that satellites is just one of the ways that we can monitor. But then if we are monitoring like InvestConservation, like Green Future Project, if we're monitoring some projects in the middle of Amazonas that, yes, can be reached by the river, but there is no convenient transport, well, actually remote sensing is the only viable way. And now, Olia, to your question. Well, over the last 40-50 years, we as the humankind made tremendous progress on improving our remote sensing capabilities. If you think about Sputnik, 1959, if I remember correctly, no, 1953, orbited the Earth a couple of times, maybe took a couple of pictures. Over that period of time, we improved our satellites to be able to collect data with sub-meter resolution. And looking at Landsat program from NASA, that is still operating satellites collecting data 30 by 30 with pixels, 30 by 30 meter, right? So with this, we already have some historical overview, we can say, oh, Amazonas is being deforested in that pace year on year, right? We had a couple of discussions with a couple of people from multiple companies. Oh, we can take a look at how Amazonas is changing over the last 20 years, and this is great. But now, if we want to say, okay, we are protecting this small piece of forest, I don't know, maybe 1,000 hectares, then being able to take advantage of sub-meter resolution enables us to precisely pinpoint, oh, there were 3 trees that were cut down over there. It's not about like 30, 50 meters. It's not about a hectare of trees that is being cut, but it's rather about those smaller clearances that actually are indicating that there is something wrong happening. And then back to Dale's opinion, yes, we can then investigate with boots on the ground people.
What about the baseline and understanding of whether or not the forest is really at risk? Because I think that's the part that's gotten most of the criticism when it comes to the existing better methodology.
Here, I think that we need to untangle a couple of aspects, right? Because on the one hand, there is methodology that says, well, we are using remote sensing data to assess deforestation, to distinguish forest, non-forest areas. And in order to assess the risk for a certain area, we are taking a look at the entire province because we are assuming that similar characteristic as for the small reserve will apply to the entire province. In a sense, this is good, right? So if we are thinking about methods available to us commercial people involved, not military, not intelligence, but normal, ordinary human beings using Earth observation, 5-10 years ago, we didn't really have other ways of assessing the risk of deforestation. But now this is almost middle of the third decade of 21st century, and now remote sensing capabilities are far, far bigger. So if you can give me like half an hour, I can give you a short, brief lecture on the improvement of remote sensing satellite capabilities over the last 5 years. But if Olya, I cannot spend this 30 minutes rambling about technology, then just let's assume that we went from 30 by 30 meter pixels down to pixels that are 3 by 3 meter. And if we are thinking about that this is like two-dimensional, this is 2 orders of magnitude, 100 times better resolution over the last 10-15 years that is accessible to us when we are monitoring forests. So now, yes, now we can think, okay, how can we do it better?
Maybe I'll just jump in and add a few points to that. I think the advantage of the technology is it does 2 things. One, it makes projects scalable. And it's scalable in 2 different directions. You can take things, you can do small projects which we could never do before because the cost of having independent consultants to go in was prohibitive. So suddenly we open up the market where we need to be opening it up. So I think that's a huge win from the technology side. It also becomes scalable in terms of you can replicate projects across different areas. So you're no longer bound to, well, when we began a project it was 8,000 hectares and we'd like to make it 12, but we have to make a new project for the extra 4, which has kind of been the status quo. We can actually scale things and make them grow. So I think that's a huge plus from the satellite side. I think having the ability to assess deforestation and baselines and do so accurately is also crucial. Now, none of that takes away from, this is where I strongly agree with Dale, boots on the ground is ultimately very, very important. So all of our projects, we actually had teams of people on the ground. I mean, I kind of view it as, is the project driven by Washington lawyers or is it driven by communities on the ground? And that basically is what makes a difference. If it's driven by lawyers in Washington, you got to get a regulatory stamp. And it might be very nice on paper, but who knows what's happening on the ground? Whereas we know on our projects, we know from the teams that are there, we know what's actually happening. So in fact, what we're trying to do is actually in an efficient way, prove that what we already know is actually correct. And that's what the reporting does so nicely. And I'd argue that's what carbon purchasers should be asking for. They should be asking for, where does my money go? How much of my money goes into the hands of consultants on the way through, and how much ends up with the local community? I think it's a bit of a scandal that most of the money ends up in the hands of Western consultants. It's a huge problem.
I completely agree. I'm going to maybe follow up on John on, I think, two key aspects that really need to change, in my opinion, in the methodology. One is what I think John was quickly referring to, the fact that the players that operate the project need to be players that have experience, need to be conservation group that have a track history. If it's a local community, needs to have somebody that can that has done the process before, that guide them and have a success. Because now we're financing a lot of projects that are opened up by funds which are developing and just trying to reap the economic benefits out of it. But you really want to, and I think it's absurd that you can open a project with having no previous experience, right? This should be definitely within the methodology. You need to have a track history of success, because we can bet on that. We can see that this has actually happened. And then the second main point, which I was really surprised the Guardian article didn't focus, and a lot of other publication, is last year alone, between 30 to up to 70% of the money went to financial intermediaries, right? We got to remember that carbon credits are an asset and they're being traded as such. And when a business buys, very often they're buying after the credit has changed 4, 5, 6 different hands. And so it goes from the biggest, the project developer, to a very large fund, and then sends it to smaller fund, and eventually it goes to the end purchase. So as John was saying, we need to be able to show the flow of money. If I'm spending 10 euro on a carbon credit, how much of this is actually going to the project? How much of this is actually going to the local community? So in that sense, technology, blockchain, and don't think of crypto, we're just talking about the solution that gives transparency to a traded asset, can help. There's other way of doing it, but the important thing here is that a buyer needs to be able to know how many people have purchased that credit before. Everybody needs to be able to see where it's been retired, and we all need to be able to know the percentage that's going to the actual project, because when buyers buy, they're actually thinking that all the money is going there, and that's incorrect. But we got to at least make sure that 70, 80, 90% of the value goes to the community. Otherwise, this incentive mechanism doesn't work. We can change the methodology, but if we don't change the way in which money travels, then we're not solving the problem at all.
Here. I want to just say I agree 100%, Pietro. And I think I just want to bring in an interesting comparison. For me, I think often as consumers, if you're going somewhere, if you're flying, I flew back to Australia, my family's in Australia. And the last time I went there, I decided to pay for e-fuel with Lufthansa rather than paying the offsets, which I'd usually pay. And the real cost for a 20% e-fuel component of my flight was over 500 euros. So that gives you an idea of the real cost of actually choosing a change in the fuel, or a change in the actual, I guess, the carbon outcome at the pump, so to speak. And then if you do it with offsetting, you come out under 150 euros. So I think this thing, to me, as soon as I see those kind of things, or flying to New York, and sometimes you can buy offsets for under 60 euros, and I just think there's just no way in the world that can be real. And then maybe, because I'm not an expert in the offsets, maybe we can put that to you, is that, like you said, I would love to be able to see on that blockchain backbone, or whatever you want, to see that history of where it's been retraded. Because what it reminds me of more than anything, I'm old enough to remember the .com crisis. I'm old enough to, not that you have to be that old, but also the financial crisis in 2008, that reselling of assets and people all taking their little slice of the sandwich. And in the end, no one's actually looking out underneath of what's happening. Maybe I went in a bit too hard and fast with the regulatory call, but I think for me that this needs to sit somehow within a framework where trust is created, and it's also not just local, because a lot of the regulatory requirements sit on the local countries, as far as I understand.
I think it makes perfect sense. Obviously, there are multiple angles to the problem, but I would like us to take up the last question in the chat, which I think is very important, because that's what underlines the issues with the unplanned deforestation methodology presented by Vera. It's actually the fact that I guess the critics call it too simple, right? Because it only looks at whether deforestation happened before or not, and doesn't say anything about some more aspects of it, like the proximity of the urban areas, grazing lands, etc., etc. Jakub, would you like to?
Yeah, sure. So Well, I think that there are two closely related questions in the chat. So starting from the one that Hans asked about identifying a single tree removed in the forest. It depends on the forest, right? There are multiple different definitions all over the world. There is different forests. Some rainforest in Ecuador is different than forest in Algeria, and the density of the trees will be different. But all in all, with high resolution imagery, you can try to actually recognize even a single tree falling somewhere in a dense forest. You can also try to recognize changes in the vegetation health. Even before actually there is real impact to the forest, you can recognize, this year the summer is too rainy actually, and this is not healthy for the trees, or there is some pest attacking it. So yes, with high resolution imagery you can get much more precise. But then Levin, I couldn't agree with you more that only observing photos of trees doesn't tell you much about the actual risks. And this is also something that we've investigated multiple times with multiple companies involved in what's happening. And well, maybe let me very quickly show my screen just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So here we are looking at Orbify, one of projects deep in Brazil. This is 30-meter resolution imagery that we use to do forest non-forest classification. So actually this is pretty pretty dense forest, right? When you are looking with this resolution. If you go with 10 times bigger resolution, then you are actually seeing that situation is much more differentiated. You are seeing some clearances that are being cut in the forest. You are seeing, by the riverbank, when there is convenient access, actually there is a lot of logging that is happening. But this alone, those deforestation patterns alone, actually aren't giving you the full picture. This is when we are looking at the whole province according to standard methodologies. We are just seeing, okay, there is forests, the green thing, the red thing is where clearances were appearing over the last 3 years actually, and this is how far we can get by just watching deforestation in this area. But then much more interesting aspects to this are urbanized areas, is also agriculture sprawl, is also fires that are happening in the forests. So based on this, by multiplying impact of different actually hazards, different risks, we can calculate our risk score for the whole reference area for this small province here, and this for this small project here, and this is probably, Levin, what you are alluding to, right? That we need to observe farther than just deforestation. We need to take into account also external factors, infrastructure, roads that are being created, settlements that are being created, agriculture that is appearing, and only this can give us actually better view into the whole situation, the whole deforestation risk. So yeah, this is probably what I wanted to show. And yes, this is not only about watching trees.
And maybe I would just add to that obviously, thanks to this technology, then you can really reassess the baseline on an annual basis, or even more, but annual should be enough. While currently for crediting, it's actually done every 5 or 6 years, right? So obviously it is essential, since conditions change so much, since the urban development changes so much, to reassess the baseline as frequently as possible. That's also something that the existing system is obviously lacking on.
Yeah, well, this is why we need high resolution imagery, high cadence of revisit time, and reporting for the sake of what Dale also alluded to, transparency, right? If we are just taking 2 snapshots, 2017, 2023, then this is what we have. We have no insight into what is happening there. If we are able to monitor the project quarterly, monthly maybe, just like what we are working on Orbify, then we can observe, oh, this quarter there has been that much roads that were created. So actually we need to start worrying about this small piece of forest.
Could I bring it back to the what Dale has mentioned as well, basically the use of blockchain and added transparency when it comes to fund tracing and all that. I know that John's project operate on blockchain. John, can you give us a little bit more background information into how it happens and the benefits that both the conservation partners and the buyers are getting out of it?
Sure. Benefits are really twofold. Number one, it's transparency. So one of the virtues of blockchain is that it's an open access ledger, which can be seen by pretty much anybody. So it creates that paper trail without incurring the cost of a third-party custodian type function, which normally is, again, that you get into the world of expensive lawyers. So it's a very simple solution to doing that. It also enables you to present a product which can be quite simple. In a way, you're creating a securitization methodology. In our case, we use tokens, which is a lot simpler than using a full securitization document, as you might see in a complex financing transaction. So what it does, it means we can keep our costs really low. So basically, it's transparency and costs. We see blockchain as a tool. We don't see blockchain as a solution. It's really a tool, and it's just one tool. As Pietro said earlier, there are other ways to do that, but we think it's probably one of the most efficient ways to do it, and that's why we've selected to go down that path. And ultimately, a lot of this comes down to, I think a lot of the conversation comes down to economics. I'm picking up Dale's comments before about how much does it cost to offset a flight. The reality is, and one of the things we see a massive difference between the impact we can drive through our projects and the cost you can do it at. So just to give you a few numbers, we see tropical forest carbon is probably worth, from a climate change perspective, about 2.5 times what a ton of temperate carbon would be worth. Because what it does, it affects the biophysical feedbacks. It affects the rainfall. It affects the forest fires. It affects deforestation away from the site you're protecting. So that's the first sort of value. Second sort of value is we've seen through some of the data we've produced with Orbify, is that deforestation, the baselines are much higher than would be traditionally assumed. And the reason for that is we are going to high value conservation areas. And the reason they're high value and the reason the projects are selected in the first place is because we know they're under threat. And that almost doubles the value again of what people are purchasing through ourselves. And then finally, we're giving twice as much money back to the conservation groups on the ground compared to a normal carbon project. So you sort of start layering up, you got 2 times 2 times 2.5, you're getting 10 times the impact. And then you compare it to a regulated market, we're selling it at a 10% of the cost of a regulated ton. So from a community, from a global perspective, we get 100 times impact per dollar. And that's kind of real scientific impact. And to me, that's where we should be going as obviously as a global community, but also as players in the carbon market. As much as we can get behind that sort of vision, that's really where we should be heading. And that'll give consumers some confidence that they can be investing in quality projects.
Can I call you in, Dale, for the buyer's perspective on that? How do you guys go about choosing the project that you invest into?
Yeah, so on our side, it was important, as I said before, it was important to us to make sure there was also a social aspect, because we see sustainability as going beyond just, kilograms of carbon. And so that's why through the projects we were looking at, we chose the project in Madagascar, because we believe, even though it's something that's much harder to measure, you can't put it down on a ledger as easily, but if you support the social outcomes for communities as well as the climate outcomes, that you're going to have a triple bottom line effect. So I think that's something that's very important to us from our side as a carbon offset buyer. And then aside from that, I mean, we are approached by various platforms on a regular basis to offset our activities. We take a mixed approach, so we work with Nesta as well. So they're obviously a well-known producer of e-fuels that's doing something to try and minimize the impact of the actual activities on the ground. And then I guess an important thing for also more broadly from our perspective is that carbon offsetting has to be part of your overall carbon strategy. So that's something we work very diligently, I would say, with my climate, and that involves us really looking at all our operations where we can minimize our carbon impacts as much as possible. And inevitably, in most industries, but particularly in the events industry, you're going to have unavoidable offsets where you need to look to the market to find a solution. And that's where we then look for projects which we think align with our values, but also the kind of impacts that we want to have on the ground.
I know that pre-panel we've had quite a few questions from people asking how do you go about choosing a project in an unfamiliar country. John or Pietro, would you like to take that question on?
Sure, I'll start. In terms of unfamiliar countries, one of the things which we do bring is, I suppose, a conservation focus. So the two countries, well, the two areas that we're focused on at the moment is Ecuador. Ecuador is it's a relatively small country. It sits in the equator with sort of mega biodiversity and one of the world's highest deforestation rates. So from a conservation perspective, it's right near the top of the pile. We work very closely with Fundación Hocotoco, which is on the ground conservation group, which manages about 31,000 hectares at the moment, and that's growing. So that's our partner there. So we know that the projects are of high value. The second area of work is in Borneo with the Nature Conservancy. Again, we work, that project is to support a local community with, again, mega threatened biodiversity on site. And right next to the palm oil deforestation frontier, orangutans, endemic primates, sun bears, sun-clouded leopards. One of the most precious sites you could basically choose, and it's owned by a community which at the moment are getting nothing from it. And picking up one of Ed's comments in the chat, we need to create the economics to actually reward people that are doing the right thing. If we reward people for creating a plan to build another noxious plant in China, which is kind of the way the carbon markets are working at the moment somewhat, that's exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be rewarding the community in Borneo who actually are serving a global conservation and a global climate benefit as well. And so really it's trying to create a market that replicates that and sends the price signal for conservation, sends a price signal for a real climate change and halting species extinction approach. So that's how we choose it. Our view is, take it from the other perspective, work with the people that know what's happening. So we'll go anywhere in terms of tropical high value places where we can work with proven partners, whether it's Madagascar, Indonesia, or Philippines, or wherever else it is, Ecuador, Brazil, any of those places we will go to as long as we have the right partners. Because without the right partners, you can't get the project with the integrity. Without the integrity, you can't then deliver a project to your consumers.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that, I think I would go back to Dale's comment, obviously. If you don't involve the community, the project has no present and definitely no future. Nobody's going to be there to carry it forward once you leave. So it's essential that you truly involve the local community, that they're the one leading the project, and that you provide not only environmental but social benefits to the community. The second one is how we choose project, Green Future Project, is when talking about nature-based solution is biodiversity, right? Everybody has been focusing only on carbon absorbing capacity. The reality is that since the 1970s, we lost 69% of the world biodiversity. And there's these things around the world, these magical things, which are, John was referring to it before, biodiversity hotspot, right? They host nearly 45% of species at risks, and they only cover 2.5% of the world's land. So here I'm talking about land biodiversity. So if you got to choose a project to invest in carbon, because at the end of the day, as a buyer, maybe you need carbon credits, do so in a biodiversity hotspot. So in Green Future Project, we only support projects which are within this area, just because we think, if we got to start somewhere, let's start by protecting the most urgent and at-risk areas on the planet. And once all of those are covered, then we can focus on other areas. But the priority should be, so, if we go back to regulation should be that projects that exist within biodiversity hotspot either, get a much higher price, or it should be the primary project where institutional investors should invest in. We really need to prioritize those because we have not even 7 years to really protect them and make sure they do not collapse as ecosystems overall.
I think there is a really good question on the chat from Abraham. Jakub, would you like to
Sure.
take it?
Well, Abraham, if that was a product webinar, I'll be happy to show how this can be easily done on Orbify, and this would be a quick thing. Oh, drag your shapefile, create analysis, and off you go. But I think that we are not in a product webinar, and here we should rather stick to more general topics. So I think that this goes back to what we discussed earlier on. It's about fusion of data from different sources. It's about data that we are able to collect on the ground from people involved in agroforestry projects who are working with the reserves, with the projects, supplemented with optical and radar imagery acquired via satellites, and based on this we can precisely not only judge tree canopy height, but even we can distinguish classes of forests. We can say, oh, this is, for example, palm oil plantation, right? And this is, for example, natural forests that is standing there for the last 30 years. So by fusing data from different sources with remote sensing, we can tell a lot about what's on the ground, also about fires, also about risk of fires, because this may be even more important. Some of our customers are using Orbify to make sure that there is this belt of burned out ground around their project reserves, so that in the dry season wildfires are not going to spread and endanger their reserves, right? So you can judge about soil humidity, you can judge about multiple different aspects with remote sensing, and definitely in many cases fusion of data from the ground is something that is important here. I don't know, Abraham, I hope I answered your question. Maybe one of my fellow speakers wants to add something to this as well. Yeah.
But there is also a really good question from Hans. Maybe John would like to answer that one.
Sure. Hans has asked us to what safeguards do we have in place to ensure the community benefit from these in a jurisdictional approach? And in some ways, that's a little bit why I began as saying emphatically we in the private sector can deliver solutions. Because I think the point is to give the funds directly to the community. If the project is designed that way, such that funds flow straight to a community or straight to the group that is managing in the community, that's the solution. So in the case of our partner in Ecuador, 104 of the 106 employees are Ecuadorian. Most of those are, in fact, nearly all the funds we provide go straight to the park guards in rural Ecuador. So these tend to be local people living in some of the poorest parts of Ecuador who are now working full-time in conservation on what are very valuable and very sought-after jobs. Minimum wage in Ecuador is enough to basically catapult those people into effectively the middle class. So these jobs are incredibly sought after. There's basically no turnover amongst the park guards. They all want to hang on to those jobs furiously. If we can get most of our funds, if we can get 85 to 95% going into the country and going to the group that's on the ground, that's the solution. And if we can then transparently report that back to the carbon purchasers know the money is not being trapped. It's not being funneled through Washington. It's not being funneled through anywhere else. Basically, it's going directly to the partners. And I think that's the key. That's what I regard as the solution. Really, is radical transparency. Where does my money go, and how does it get there? I think that's the path we should be trying to pursue. And I think in a jurisdictional approach at a government level, that's going to be really, really hard. If you put the money into a general mix at a government level, my kind of perspective is leave that to the intergovernment agreements. If the Norwegian government wants to do something with another government, we as a private sector, we'll get squashed between those elephants. So let's not put ourselves in that position. Let's focus on what we can do, which is safeguarding what Pietro says, safeguarding those biodiversity hotspots and making sure the community benefits.
Yeah, I think David asked a very, very interesting question as well. He's focusing on, the fact that existing registry, the one that basically own the market, have set the bar too low on the quality of projects, and that we should focus on moving back up the bar. I think my take would be, David, that maybe we just need to move to new registry. Maybe we need to move to registry that already have the correct methodology, that have in place the correct check and balances to make sure that project is of quality, and insert, and there are these registries, InvestConservation is one of them, but there's many other, right, that are trying to get it fully accredited according to the ISO standards, and maybe that's what we have to focus on, really, because rechanging the structure that has failed for so long might be more difficult than just picking up one that is light, is cost effective, and has a much more focused approach on a specific problem. For example, InvestConservation only focus on the conservation of primary forests in tropical areas. So, as a buyer, that if you want to focus on that and invest in that, since they do just that, it's most likely that they do that at a very high quality level, rather than, having a lot of different technological and non-technological solutions mixed together, which is much more confusing.
And I think that this is really good, actually, that there are different approaches in the market. And while I fully agree with you, Pietro, that what John and InvestConservation is doing is super important, then let's remember that some of those already traditional registries were created before we had these sophisticated capabilities, right? So I think it's easy to jump on this bandwagon that bad companies, but actually they had to start somewhere, and we already started being more aware of offsetting carbon. We already started thinking more how we can protect forests. So while I agree with you, I would like to say that I very much appreciate the work that has been laid out as the foundation for us to build on top of it. And yeah, maybe now it's the time for transition. For sure, this is how the world goes, right? We are building on top of experiences of previous generations, but I would be far from discouraging, music of the Beatles. While I'm not a big fan, I still think that they did a lot to the music.
Well said, Jakub. I think that's exactly right. Those of us who've been in the carbon markets for much of the last 20 years, we don't necessarily want to have all of that thrown out, because there's been a few bad apples and a few problems. We really want to see it moving to a next stage, to iterate into a next stage. I think that's the most important message. The worst of the worst is that the perfect becomes the enemy of the good, and that's definitely the worst case scenario. So I think you summarized it very well.
I think connected to that would be the question of balance between conservation projects and afforestation or regeneration projects. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? What should the balance look like ideally? Because I've seen from the statistics that the majority of the carbon market is actually preoccupied by conservation projects. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Good question. And I think that there are two sides of the coin here, because on the one hand, reforestation is quite tangible, right? No tree, forests. So we made an impact. On the other hand, real actually benefits of carbon being sequestered will be 20, 30 years from now, if no one chops the forest in the meantime. Because right now the trees are relatively small, so not a huge impact. If we cut the forest, on the other hand, if we deforest a certain area, then obviously there is a bigger impact on carbon being released to the atmosphere, right? So I think that both are needed, both are necessary. With avoided deforestation, it's easier to game the system. You can say, oh, we would have chopped had chopped the forest if not the money we are getting, while there is no such risk, right? So avoided deforestation is less black and white, but I think that still this is what gives us impact now. So I think both. Not sure what other experts here think about.
I advocate for consumers here as well, if I may. I just want to say, I think that we also need a lot more education, I think is one part of it, so that I mean, generally when you buy an offset as just a normal human, we're not talking about the GreenTech Festival, we buy really a large sum of offsets. You buy it with just clicking a button. And I think there the onus has to go on the corporations that are then offering those services, that they don't have best in class. You know, I love talking in this round because I just feel like I'm in the hands of people who do actually care about the outcome. And as John mentioned earlier about bad apples, you know, the way to root out bad apples is to not, you know, give them any fertilizer. And I think that's one of the things where we need to move forward in terms of the consumer market, where people are aware of what the carbon market is, and there's the ability for us to really be able to see a rating. I don't know what it has to be. I put it to the experts here, but something that allows us as the normal everyday sheep that are jumping on a plane because we need to go across a pond somewhere, you know, a long flight, to be able to then know that what we're purchasing isn't just making us feel great while we sit back and eat our little, you know, single packed meal on the airplane. So that'll probably stir up the bee's nest now even more. We've only got a few minutes left, but I just thought I'd put it out there from my perspective as a consumer.
John, do you have an opinion? Otherwise, I'll.
You go first, Pietro. I'll follow.
Okay. I think, yeah, obviously both are quality solution. I think the important thing is, you know, we talk a lot about, or hear a lot of talk about tree planting, and the bottom line is really how you do it, whether you plant endemic species or not. But more importantly, we're 8 billion people today on the planet. We're going to be 10, so we're going to need more land probably to grow the food that we need to survive. And so it's really important to focus on, you know, if I'm planting a forest there, what is the use of that land in 50, 100, 200 years? Because if you're planting a forest that has no future to stay because it's going to be used for agricultural land, then it's kind of useless. Therefore, my favorite superhero tree is mangrove trees that don't really take up agricultural land. They don't need water. They can't catch fire. They regenerate the marine ecosystem. They avoid and soil erosion. They slow down tsunamis. So it has a lot of benefits, and the world used to be covered with a mangrove forest, and we've chopped down a lot of them. So I think if we're talking about planting trees, the focus should be really there.
I might just add to that. I think there's certainly a role for those afforestation credits. Ideally, they are ones that promote biodiversity as well. There are plenty of places where reforestation can be done. It does tend to be relatively expensive. So they do tend to be more expensive credits to generate, especially if it's done well. Whereas I think on a value for dollar basis, a standing forest can actually be more value. My answer for a retail consumer is that if they're buying from a company, if the company can point to a specific area that they are protecting, this is a reserve that we're protecting, and these are the species that live in it, that in a way is the solution to, you know, where does my money go? If you know, well, when I click on this button to buy my airfare credit that is going to support orangutan conservation on the front lines of the palm oil versus tropical rainforests in Indonesian Borneo, you kind of know immediately, well, that's where money is going. And if you know most of your money is getting there, that's the secondary component. So to my mind, it's that tying it back to the local, to the land area, that gives you from a conservation side the transparency. And the afforestation, I agree with what Pietro said. The mangroves are a good way to be going.
All right, we're almost at time. We've got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to thank everyone for coming to our panel. Thank you for all the questions that you've added to the chat. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for their insights. I think it's been great. You guys did a really good job. I'm very proud of you. My colleague Carlos will be dropping in everyone's websites and LinkedIn profiles into the chat in a second. So please feel free to connect with the panelists on LinkedIn and follow their respective companies. We'll be sending the recording in a couple of days, so we'll be able to access that. And our next actually webinar this time is going to be on geospatial ESG. which is an emerging topic, and that is something that we're very keen on as well. So please follow us as well on social, and you'll be invited to that one. And yes, we've got some handouts as well. So if you would like to take a look at those, you can. We've got the Green Future Project deck and the Green Tech Festival flyer in it. So enjoy, and we will be very happy to see you in our next event.
Thank you, Olya.
Yeah, thanks, Olya, and thanks to all the participants. Thanks for your great questions. It was super to talk with you, and John, Pietro, Dale, it was absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thanks a lot for your
Olya.
time.
Thanks
Thanks
Jakub.
all.
Bye.
Cheers, John.
Cheers, guys.